All right, Assalamu alaikum. Hello, everyone. Thank you for ending up in this channel. AJS Therapy has an honor to welcome a prestige guest, Halida Haque, a guest who, if you don't know much about Islamic psychology, you would be happy to know is long, maybe overstayed actually in this community, but she's long working contributing to the mental health betterment, a flourishing of community based in London, and I would say even beyond now. Khalida Haque, she's qualified integrative psychotherapist, counselor, but also, I would say loudly, please don't mind, but a project developer, mental health project developer. And Halida, your specialty is domestic violence. But also, she's an author of this beautiful book, Islamically Integrated Psychotherapy and Domestic Abuse. Just published. It's like fresh from the printers. I'm so, um, I'm so honored to have you here, and thank you for this gift. Have I done any disservice to you in terms of introduction? Please correct me.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for inviting me here. And I don't know about disservice. I don't think you could ever do me a disservice, Aisha. I am honored and privileged to be here to be speaking about my journey, I guess, in psychotherapy and the work that I do and why I do it, and also how the book came about. But it's really an honor and a privilege to be here, and I'm hoping to share as much as I can with your listeners.
Yes, yes, please do. I've received few messages. They can't wait actually to hear from you. So let's start with this. Yeah, that's why we're meeting here today.
Mm.
What is the niyyah behind it? This is I don't know how long it took you, but this is way before it got published. If you read this book, you will understand how well thought it is. There was a journey before, wasn't it? There is intention before. Could you let us in, into this process first?
Okay, well, intention is obviously what all actions are based upon. So writing everything, obviously. And my niyyah, I guess I felt very much it's a trust that was laid and planted within me when I was very young. I mean, when I was created, really, when we're created, we know that that's, Allah puts everything in us, and we have a purpose and something that we are to deliver. I believe in the world. And I guess for me, it has been one of the things I feel I was meant to deliver was this book, inshallah. And so in terms of the Nia, so going back, I guess in terms of domestic abuse in particular, to think about domestic abuse, as a young person, I had family member who experienced this, and I recall at the time thinking to myself, I need to do something about this. I must do something about this. And so that was laid, I guess, as a seed within me. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sort of carried through the rest of the plan. And so, really, although I didn't have the language, I knew that it was stored within my body. I knew that the impact in terms of what it does to people, in terms of their bodies, in terms of their self worth, and also in terms of in relation to understanding it really through you know our experiences and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a relationship with that and our responsibilities, whether we're survivors, perpetrators, bystanders of this. It's really important because what I've noticed in terms of the harm is that it's often minimized, it's often normalized, and it's often spiritualized within families. And I'm not saying it's intentional, but it does have that lasting impact. So it's really important. So I guess to say that early experience has really stayed with me as that moral reference point.
And I don't want to go to second question, but I think I don't have any other choice. So
Okay.
I'm going to go for the second question, but I'm still going back to Mia.
Hmm.
So if you know Halida Haque, and I do know Halida as a professional, we had some time when we worked together, when we presented together. So if you know her personally, and professionally as it was given in my example, you can't help but know that Halida, you are so ethical, you are so moral. If anything, you will think twice before anything is being done, anything being said, any decision is being made. So there is that safety and trust around your person, around the way you work. But I can't help but notice that it started in that moment that you shared with us, isn't it? And it feels to me like, I don't know, I imagine you were young woman or young girl, maybe, uh, some sort of given responsibility landed on your shoulders, and you lifting it up ever since. Yes, maybe in your heart, maybe in your education later on, in your experience. Now, as a sage, giving all those expertise away into our hands in the form of book. But I can't help but notice that it started in that moment, the responsibility.
Yes, and it is, and I think it's important for us to recognize that we do have responsibilities, and duties and obligations, and I like how you had said that perhaps in that moment that's what happened, that I was given the mantle of something to deliver, inshallah, and here I am now. And I really believe, it's long before professional training. This is like, I knew, um, in terms of Islamically, there was something laid within me to remember, we have to act with integrity. We have to be true to ourselves and to our deen, and to, our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to the akhirah. And if we keep those things in mind, then we will be ethical. We can be nothing but ethical. I mean, we know, in terms of uh, contracts and transactions, it's all there in the Quran, and in the teachings about being ethical. So how can we not be ethical in other aspects of our lives? So it's super
Mm,
important. And, and when I talk about sort of ethics, it's really recognizing that it's not just victims. It's the hadith of like help the oppressor as well as the oppressed. It's recognizing that's part of ethics. We can't just sort of move away people who are oppressed and, look after them. We have to stop the oppressor from oppressing. And so that's why it's really holistic, in terms of the way that I look at things, that it's not just an individual level or a family level, it's a community level.
very
It's beyond,
structural, your
it's,
approach. Yeah. Yes, yeah, it's extremely ethical, but also very structured, and it's like a mini course into counseling, really, but higher than just for beginners. This level of your expertise, successes in working with community, the way you write about your projects, and the elements that provided efficacy, but also the structure um, of your approach is very structured, very organic. You don't just stay with the problem, with the symptoms. You're looking for the roots, but also something very, if you don't mind, Quranic about your approach. Amal al-Saho, Salih, sorry, Amal al-Salih, meaning what next, and you give heap of advices in terms of what next, and not what next for the victim only, but for the families who's silencing, for the community who's spiritualizing this whole experience, excuses, for the society as well, how they should, and how we also are responsible to integrate with already existing uh, provisions from authorities, and how we should challenge as well, and show the gaps, in this partnership. It's a really well thought approach. And I just wonder, um, it's more than ethics, isn't it, in your approach? It's more than just ethics. There's something more than, and I just wonder if we could put our hands together. How is it that, you can see this work from such a holistic way? How did it came about?
Experiences really. I mean, that's the thing. We, as I said, that in first instance, experiencing, witnessing these things, and Allahu alam as to what I, experienced before, in terms of before I came to the UK, um, because there's things, I came over when I was 4 years old, and so there are things that I may have witnessed even back then that sort of laid foundations. But what I guess I'm saying is that it's important to recognize that experiences what we see. So what we see with, so I've seen within families, within sort of wider society, within social settings, within masjid settings, within work settings, sort of all settings that I've worked within, but also just lived within and been around school settings, recognizing that it's not just within, obviously, Islamically, and Islamic sort of communities and Muslim communities. It's a widespread issue. Yeah, it has no boundaries in terms or borders in terms of who
No,
experiences these sort of
absolutely.
abuses and oppression, as we know, and we know that it's also happening on a global scale. But that's another
Yeah,
whole
it's
other
not only,
podcast.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, but it's not only some, I think majority of our listeners can appreciate that
mm,
domestic violence is not specific to Muslim community. It is a global phenomenon, always
yeah,
was. But how can we turn it into not always will be, right? And this is
yeah.
what your book is about.
And I guess the thing is that underlying it all is love, love for
Okay.
my brother. Yeah, what I love for myself,
The
really.
reason why we're giggling is because
Yeah,
just before we started recording, we spoke
yes,
about love, dear
yeah,
listener. So apologies for those faces, but yeah, thank you uh, for this door. I never knew that you could feel comfortable with it, but yes, this book is written with love, no doubt, no
yes,
doubt. The love for the human being, um, but also I think very much aligned with the positive psychology, if you don't mind me saying. There is a hope. There is underlying message of the hope. Yes, um, very straightforward. You're not mother coddling here, which I absolutely love and appreciate. But also there is something about love, in this book, and I wonder if you could, um, elaborate about that. What do you
well,
think? Why love?
why love? Well, because I think that is the better way to deal with
Mm.
oppression. And if we think of oppression and things like that as crimes related to hate, right? And we're told that I'm not going to remember it correctly, but we're told to sort of love and sort of equal, and hate actions are not equal, um, and that we should repel that which is evil with that which is better, right? And love is always better, and so that's how I've lived my life, like focusing on how to love rather than how to sort of uh, follow through with anger or impatience or anything related to those sort of more difficult emotions. And I think when we do that within ourselves, so whether that's as survivors, as perpetrators of abuse, it's recognizing the examples that we have, right? How did the prophets behave? And they came through love, right? They would behave through love. But if we then look at the exemplar of shaitan, who I talk about as being
Oh,
the
yes, you
archetype of
do.
archetype
Yeah,
of the
the
abuser,
highlight, absolutely highlight of your
uh,
approach.
uh, we recognize that that's how not to be, and we can see that it's through his negative feelings, jealousies, hate, that's what fuels his behaviors, right? And if we can use love for ourselves, love for others, within ourselves, and to take responsibility, because ultimately that's what it is. coming back to, that the way that we can change things is if we take a moral responsibility and a moral accountability for how we are behaving, and also to sort of stand up when there's injustice occurring. And and it's, as we know, at different in different spheres, in different ways that we do that. And that's what I hope that the book shares, that it's, there's different ways of dealing with it. And there are other people, and I mentioned other sort of organizations and people who have delivered and use some of their work as examples of how we can do things better.
Mm. There's something therapeutic about this book, and I think love is a perfect first step into this paradigm, into this layer of this book, to depth of this book. And being trained in psychodynamic, I couldn't help but just celebrate and really appreciate this moment when you bring about the archetypal work um, of Jung, and you invent, suggest, argue about archetype, the shaitan archetype.
Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. It's so beautiful because, if anything, a reader, specifically a person who is in recovery from being a role, for taking the role of abuser, or maybe a system who is recovering from being abusive and oppressive, they can see that no one is free from this trap, because if anything, archetype is a potential in us.
Mm-hmm.
And that is love in itself. That is working on yourself from the perspective of restoration. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you've brought that up. And as I've sort of mentioned, that actually, we are responsible. We
Mm.
have to look at ourselves, whether as individuals or communities or systems. We're all part of that. And it's really recognizing that. But I guess I'm cautious of conflating sort of shaitan with just, say, toxic Muslim masculinity or masculinity at all, or just meldom. It's really important to remember that we know that abuse is not gender exclusive, although we do
That's not.
know that it is against women. But we just also know, I think it's really important not to sort of create that dichotomy of discourse around this, and that, just being aware that people of any gender can misuse power, and can harm others. And I guess what's really important, I think, is that Shaitan represents things like arrogance, entitlement, refusal of taking accountability and responsibility, and that projection of blame. And that we, as you've said, it's all within us, right? And that we are
Mm.
able to do that, uh, project blame onto others. We're also equally able to say, like, it's not my fault, have anything to do with it. And so it's really important to recognize that that's within all of us. I'm not saying, it's just out there and other people have it. And that's what I hope, that when I, in the way that I've written about the archetype, that it's
Oh,
clear that that's not
yeah,
what
no,
I'm
no.
saying, that,
The reader
yeah.
cannot go wrong. The reader cannot go wrong. The way you write is very clear. It doesn't leave gaps for misconceptions. And yes, a reader is invited to think about about domestic abuse from the psychodynamic, psychoanalytical perspective, meaning taking responsibility for your own actions, responsibility for your own growth, for self-awareness, which is so Islamic, which is so refreshing as well on the market. But more than that, you are right. Obviously, you are right. We do know it's not gender specific. And you're using a magic word in this book, which is maybe even, I would say, women against women sort of perspective. You're talking about mother-in-law. Yeah. And which also, I think, in our community could be turned into an archetype, because very often it is a structural thing. And when I and you, sitting as a therapist with the families who are entangled in domestic abuse, with any sort of violence and oppression, they will not understand the definition of responsibility the way we understand it. That for them, that will in itself be justification to continue the way they are because of the reputation. And no community is free from it. But I think in our community, we have that specific archetypal thing going on, which is a shaitan, a work um, in place, a mother-in-law in place. And you write about it. You do make a good point about it, and I really appreciated that. Thank you. That's courage.
And thank you. But I guess what you've brought up really is actually recognizing the intergenerational aspect of this. As you said, the psychodynamic way of looking at things of the what's happened, how have people created these internal worlds, not words, worlds, that they've been raised in such abusive environments. That's what happens. Like what internal world are we then creating for these people? These dynamics show up not just in the perpetrators. It shows up in those witnessing it. It shows up in those suffering it, and also that it also shows up, as you said before, in the way that systems minimize the harm of
Yes,
this as
yes,
well.
yes.
As you said, so the mother-in-law, the system is minimizing actually the effect of the way that the mother-in-law may be being with the daughter-in-law, which will then impact the whole environment, the abusive, whether it's abusive or whether it's calm or harmonious and all of that. And it's recognizing that what happens then when the children grow up in these sort of fearful homes, it's not always violence, it's the threat of violence, but it's fear, like children growing up with just a sense of fear and anxiety, and so what do? They recognize things as silence is safety, things like control is caring, and then the obedience is actually protection. And if we think about how children have grown up and how people are, and if you think about these mother-in-laws as you've described, and sometimes daughter-in-laws as well, so it's remembering that we're all coming, it's not, I don't want to sort of demonize anyone
No.
or create that sort of, that's the focus. It's all of us, and so that recognizing within ourselves that when we're being silent, it's a place of safety. That's what we're used to. Being controlling is something that shows care to people. That's what they've learned, and as I said, that thing of again of obedience being protection, that actually that's sort of somehow protects me from that any sort of violence that might come towards me, whether that's physical violence or um, sort of verbal, or just the threat of it being in the air.
And yes, you're right. We thought that this archetype is there to demonize people or systems. It's not. It's actually, I would argue, an invitation to quicker forgiveness. Because if we think about victims, they they have a long journey of their re-traumatizing process, and part of it will be forgiving to not only one person but the people who were in this system. And I just wonder, what a relief that could be for some people to understand, oh, so my perpetrators, whatever good they gave me, it was real, it was truth, it was yakin, but also whatever done oppression and experience for them is also reality, because of this phenomena, which is archetypal work. And they've chosen the path of being the pharaoh, the shaitan archetype. That's their
Tyrant, yeah.
choice. Yeah, but also how could I see the red flags? Because normally, that's the story, how the story goes. At the beginning, everything is just normal before you start questioning yourself. So So to help a person to understand there is a duality going on here, there is that ambiguity, and it's normal because there are, like, we have no clinical proofs to explain why you felt in the dark, why you felt gaslighted, why you felt that you needed to second guess yourself. I just can't imagine what a and I hope, that maybe you've experienced that already. What a great relief for the victim that must be, that part of psychoeducation of your work.
I'm hoping so. I'm hoping that it allows them to forgive themselves. You said
Mm,
like forgiving various things, but it's also to forgive themselves for not
mm,
noticing,
mm,
things. And sometimes we may have noticed, but other things come into play. So
mm,
remembering that, that normalization, that wanting love is, higher than the recognition of like, actually, is this the right environment for me?
mm,
What am I walking into? Maybe, and that's the thing. It's about recognizing what are the drivers within us that
mm,
cause us to be insert. And again, it's coming back to accountability and responsibility. And again, it's not victim blaming or any of those things. It's really about, again, individuals looking at ourselves, and systems looking at ourselves. It's
mm,
us looking together,
mm,
collaboratively at
mm.
ourselves. It's not about sort of, again, focusing on one aspect. And I think it's really important to recognize, again, that, coming back to what it's, what our environments and our early environments have done in terms of shaping our nervous systems, our attachments, our moral reasoning, all of these things, and even, the way that we relate to our faith, how it's all of these things will have impacted that. And so really,
Mm.
that's what I hope that I've conveyed through that. And I brings me also that shared responsibility, the fard kifaya, that it is a community responsibility. And I really do feel, that first hadith that I use as a tagline, if you like, in the book, not on the cover, of help the oppressor as well as the oppressed. And then the Prophet ﷺ was asked how should we, how should I help the oppressor? And it's to stop him, but that's to recognize that that is a whole system responsibility.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And you do take each and every element of the system into their own accountability. But at the same time, you're doing it with hope. You're doing it not only ethically, not only rationally. This book is for very rational brains and minds. Spoiler, it's very rational book. Um, but also you're doing it with love, and it feels like we've made that circle. We've started with love, we're finishing with love. You can't escape from love. In this book, and I hope I'm going to make you giggle again. But my fantasy is that there's going to be a sequel. There's going to be a part two,
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
going to go into more details of this introspective inner work where you actually continue talking about both spiritual abuse, how mosques and leaders they enabling the maintenance of toxic masculinity in our community, when you talk about those archetypes and you talk more about self-forgiveness. So this is my fantasy, but also my question: is there a plan? Please don't share if you don't feel comfortable, but it just, I can't help but notice, but feel like, she's got something more to say. There's something more to it.
Well, thank you for that. You never know. Let's just leave it at that. Allah is in charge of all of these things. So, this book took a while to come round, and it came round at Allah's timing, and anything future will. But you've touched on sort of, I guess, mosques and mosque leaders, masjids and masjid, imams and things. And I think it's important to recognize that survivors often first turn to family, community, and faith leaders. And it's important if these systems then you respond with like that silence and minimization, or even spiritual bypassing, saying, alhamdulillah, just have sabr and these things, then harm that's where it becomes intergenerational. If we can't find that support in the family and the structures around us, And so really coming back to ethical responsibility again, it's really recognizing the what does ethical responsibility look like, and it looks like trauma informed, like actually understanding what it means for people. And it's everywhere in terms of trauma. It's like, I think we spoke about it before, and you mentioned something about the fiber, like recognizing that trauma is in the very fiber of our societies, our communities. But we need faith literate services as well as trauma informed services. Clear safeguarding pathways, and that's safeguarding is a part of our deen as well. I mentioned that as part of the
Fun.
book as well.
Mm,
And then really looking at programs where we're working with the abusers, not only to address power and entitlement, but their own emotional regulation, without excusing any of the harm that they're doing. We need to help faith leaders be equipped to prioritize safety over appearances and what people see of us. So all of these things are really, really important. But I just wanted to sort of share that really this work, I feel, is that honoring and amana, to name harm clearly, to protect those, that are vulnerable, and to really refuse silence. And I also hope that it's, fulfilling my purpose. So really,
mm, absolutely.
and which, is continuing to unfold with time, as I said. So in terms of another book, Allahu Alam, and it may be part of my purpose, and if Allah wills it, then it will happen. So yeah, really just that.
Um, Beautifully said, beautiful summary. Um, and just to reiterate, if if you can appreciate it, this book is not only for those of you who are entangled in the systemic abuse. This book is also for therapists, also for agencies. There's so much of a wisdom. You almost take a reader, by hand, and you're showing them how effective this approach can be. But also, if anything, for mosques leaders. I imagine this book will be somewhere on their shelves in the working environment. Now we're being stopped by a van. How perfect is that? Thank you, Halida, for being so generous with your time and with your wisdom. Thank you for being here. And I'm sure that Halida will be more than happy to welcome all your questions if you are watching this video. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please do ask questions. I may not be up to answering them all, but I will do my best, to sort of guide you or direct you into the right direction if I'm not able to answer them.
Jazakallah Harry again, and until next one, shall I leave it at that?
Yes. Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah.
Assalamu alaikum.